Namaskar to everyone. Last week, we discussed the sections from the 17th chapter, the three elements which makes one's actions auspicious. The three elements were yajna, tapa, and dhanam. And each of it were classified into sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Yajna is sacrifice, tapaha is austerity, and sattvic tapaha was austerity of the body, austerity of mind, and austerity of speech. Now, today we will study the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic dhanam. Dhanam is gift. Now, before I get into the elucidation of the verses 20, 21, and 22, which gives sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic dhanam from the 17th chapter, I left you all last week with a question to ponder. The question was, what is the difference between yajna, which is sacrifice, and dhanam, which is gift? Isn't it? Am I right, Rajima? The difference between yajna and dhanam. So any insights, any thoughts? Because in both these qualities, you're actually parting, you're actually giving. There is that spirit of giving in both these elements. Now, the giving is not necessarily material. It's not necessarily monetary. It can be in any form. You could give your physical body in terms of your tapaha, which is your tapo yajna, as we learn, is you could do physical service, you can give your time, you can give your energy, you could give emotions, you can give knowledge. So it's not necessarily gross. But what is the difference between yajna and dana? Any thoughts? You okay?
Namaste, Guruji.
Namaskar, ma.
Yajna, I mean, this is my personal thought, Guruji. Yajna is something.
Why can't you give impersonal thought?
Because there may be so many implications for it, Guruji.
What do you mean implications?
Yeah, there may be so many viewpoints for it. What is my viewpoint? I'm just expressing. Yajna is something which you give selflessly, even if you require it, even if you, I mean, even it's your, you need it for yourself, still you sacrifice it when for somebody's usage or something. And whereas dana is something which you have, and what is extra, you just give it as a charity to someone.
Could you come again, please?
Dana is something which you have in excess, and then you want to part with a certain part of it as a charity to somebody. Whereas yajna is something which you have, which you yourself need, but still you part with it because somebody else needs it.
The way you've answered, the search has ended. You actually spelled it out. Perfect. So nice to hear from Yuma. So the difference between Dhanam and Yajna. Now, Dhanam, as we say, is gift. Gift is something you do necessarily part with, and you part with it because you have a certain identification, you have a certain emotional connect with someone out there. You feel others are a part of you, so you share what you have with those who don't. So the suggestion or the implication is, in order to part with something as a gift, you should have enough, you should have surplus, you should have things in exodus that you have enough to part with for others' needs. You're only sharing your conveniences and your privileges. But when you do give, one important criteria is you should not feel impoverished by your giving. You shouldn't feel any less when you give. So it is not the hand that gives, it's the heart that gives. So you don't feel you are impoverished by your giving. One who feels less, one who feels impoverished by his giving, he has not done any dhanam, he has not done any charity at all. That is no charity. So that dhanam, that charity or gift to be done when you feel there is a certain concern for others. Just taking a simple example, let's say I have 5 trousers or 10 trousers with me, and you see your garbage guy who comes every day to pick up your garbage from your house. You've noticed more than once he has worn torn clothes, not because it is fashion, because he doesn't have any better clothes to wear. You might go out into the malls, you will find people generally wearing torn clothes than, in fact, you feel you're far better dressed than them. Because the nowadays the more it is torn, that's the trend, the fashion. But this fellow is not so because of any fashion trend. It's because poor fellow has nothing else to wear. And you have not, it's not that you have to have an emotional connect, but instant you feel for that person. And you may say, yeah, so many of my trousers are lying in the cupboard. You tell that fellow, hey, what is your size, man? Oh, sir, this is my size. Okay, you tell him, I'll give you a couple of trousers. Just see if it fits you. If it doesn't, you may have to do a middle adjustment. That fellow is excited. I remember when I had found myself obliged to give. I had put them through laundry. I had ironed them, went through the press, and then given to them. Not just taken off the shelf with the dust and the and it's not something which is just given. Enama?
Guruji, it was to the gardener, and he was so happy. He was leaving for his village the same day, and he said, I only took Guruji's clothes and I wore it, and it was so nice.
No, she knows about it because the common gardener she introduced, and that guy comes to the house and the foundation to just do a little work. So when I parted with it, I made sure. And what that guy acknowledged me was, Guruji, I didn't have to do anything. I just wore it because you washed it, you ironed it, and you gave it to me. That is what I like it, he said, in his own way. You know? Not that you are seeking that appreciation from him, but something you feel connected to. So you part, and there's nothing great about it. See, there's nothing necessary to talk about. Just give me an example. You have something surplus, you part with it. That is called as dhanam. You're parting with gifting someone. But when the element of sacrifice comes, let's say there's only 2 pairs of it, and you part with 1 pair and you just do with 1 for yourself, or you only have 1 and you part with it, then you don't say it's a gift. Then you say it's a sacrifice. You have sacrificed what you have for others' conveniences, others' comforts. So when you do something, when you don't necessarily have in abundance, but still consider to part with it, so that the real test is you are not in abundance, but you still choose to keep others' well-being, others' interest more than yours, then it becomes yajna, sacrifice. So sacrifice is when you don't necessarily have it in abundance, but still choose to give. Dhanam is you choose to part with it when you have something in surplus, and yet you do not feel impoverished by your acts of giving. That is the quintessential difference between yajna and dhanam. I thought there should be that understanding before you expand on the dhanam. Now, there could be more points, perhaps some of you have thought. Now, is there anything that beyond this you want to share? Anybody, please? Is there anything apparent difference you find? Tinkima, yes, please.
Yes, Hari Om Guruji.
Yes,
There's a
Hari Om.
doubt. I mean, I don't know. We always understand dhanam as charity. So here it says gift. So what is the difference? Like I may gift someone something, you know, on a special occasion or for a special reason or something, which is different from doing charity. So what is the difference then between giving a gift and doing charity? Like I think a gift you can give to anyone at any level, economic, social status, but charity one doesn't normally do for somebody who is, like what charity can I do for Mukesh Ambani? I don't know. If he needs, it will be at a level where I can't even think. So
give him Atma Vidya. He doesn't have it with him. Knock at his door and give him Atma Vidya. He's a pauper at that. So you have plenty of it. Part with it.
I'll send him takeaways.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know that is there some subtle difference between a gift and charity, or the same?
I would take it as same rather than hair splitting it at this point. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Guruji.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Keshav ji.
Pranam Guruji.
Namaskar, sir. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to share my one experience, what I heard. My grandfather, my mother's father, they are they are poor people. And my grandmother is very intelligent lady. My grandfather was a innocent type of person, but a nice person. One day somebody approached him, sir, I don't have a dhoti, can you please help me? Then he gave his own dhoti, what he was wearing, and took a gunny bag around him, clad a gunny bag around him, and went home. And my grandmother was very unhappy. What is this? You don't have sense. You don't have any, you are such a useless man, something like that. She scolded him. She said, if I ask you to give, you don't give. On my own, if I ask one dhoti to give to that man, you will not give. But this way I can give. So therefore I gave it. So that's what I wanted to share, Guruji. Thank you.
Right. Not many have that presence of mind. Not many have that grace, I would say. When you give, you must give it. In fact, one of the first things he says, you must give it at the right time, at the right place. So that's perfect example of it. Perfect. Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other inputs? If not, we will just move on. Sushma Ma, yes. Gayatri Ma has not influenced you enough, Ma.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes.
I just wanted to share, when I was a child, about 8-9 years old, my father, used to talk to us children in the evening. And one of the things he used to say, "Mere dwar se kabhi koi khali haath na jaye." And that, I think, influenced at least my mind a lot, because he said not only money, if somebody, whoever needs what, whether it was money, whether they need a job to try to help him, or whether he needed medical aid, whatever type of help, if it was in his power to help him, he used to say, "Mere dwar se kabhi," and we saw him living it. That nobody ever went away dissatisfied if they went to him for any help. So I think these sort of things, if children see in the younger age, it does influence their mind. And then he used to also recite a Sanskrit shlok. Can I say it? It's 3-4 lines. Yeah.
Please, please, by all means.
He used to say, "Pibanti nadyan na swayamev nambha, khadanti vriksha na savadu phalani, ambo dharovar rashyatinatva meto, par upkar tisham vibhuti." That the greatest divine quality you can have is to do paropkar. And because I feel we saw him not only reciting this, but living it. So I think that influences the children what they see in their home.
No, absolutely. In fact, the fact that it transformed you at such a young age, and then undeniably you would have led a life inspiring many more, is itself an example what is an onus on a leader, and at a family front, if the head of the family not only lectures but lives a life, it is truly a blessed life,
Yeah.
So
then when I was young, I mean, after my marriage, when we started our home, I had very little money, but I wanted this feeling that I want to help people give. Then I read somewhere that seva is with tan, dhan, man. So I used to say, I don't have the dhan, but I have the man and I'm strong. So first few years, I used to look after people, cancer patient, family may, friend may. So a lot of people, I used to do that, and I used to feel very fulfilled doing it. And then as I've grown older, now I feel I have the dhan, but I don't have the physical energy to do anything. So it has become the opposite. Man has been there also, man has been here also.
correct.
But the difference is now I don't physically cannot go and help people. But that is what younger time I could do that.
You're still serving, you're still sacrificing, so indeed you're blessed. Thanks for sharing your insights, ma. Thank you, really appreciate that. Okay,
Thank
right. Yes, ma. Namaskar. Sudhakar ji.
Hari Om Guruji.
Namaskar, Hari Om, sir.
Right now I am in a different place, 1.5 hours before your time.
Yes, I know.
But yet I made it a point I should not avoid your presentation and satsang.
Yes, I'm glad you're able to connect.
I am blessed.
Thank you. Yes.
And Agnam, most of the people, these very rich people, just like Bill Gates, Azim Premji, and so many other people, they do lots of charity. It can, it's millions and millions of dollars they do. So whether it goes directly, it is classified as Agnam or Danam.
As we defined,
it is going for a different good causes also. And since it is abundance with them, they are doing okay. But the motive behind it, whether it is classified as Agnam or Danam, I wanted to know.
No, see the motive only, it is not sacrifice, because as it is being given from a platform of abundance, it falls under the classification of Danam, which is gift or charity. But whether it falls in the Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic is the motive and the intention that decides, which is what we'll very soon study now. So it's the motive wouldn't qualify it as a yajna or dana, not that way, but the motive determines what quality of danam you're doing.
Yes.
Okay, so very soon we'll just get into the text. We'll take up so that we'll be able to clarify further there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ji. All right.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, Venkatramji.
Hari Om Guruji.
Hari Om, sir.
So it is also important, and probably you will dwell on that, in terms of when we do Danam, did we accrue all of that through ethical means? Or did we, and there are many instances, I just don't want to dwell into that. Will these scriptures or the thoughts also talk about that? Or maybe you would then classify them into the Rajasic, Tamasic, or whatever it is. Because there are a lot of people who do Danam, who have an abundance of money, but then that money accrued through, means which are not ethical. I would have my own, viewpoint around that. But hopefully, I think, the scriptures would also clarify that piece of it.
Nothing to my knowledge specifically.
Okay.
Not to my limited knowledge. I do not know whether the Shastras do mention anything. But when we speak of acquiring wealth, they do talk about which path you take to acquire. You can take Rajasic and Tamasic would fall under the unethical category.
Yes.
The Sattvic falls under the ethical category, where you gain that produce because of your sacrificial life. So you eat the remnants of sacrifice. This is the exact words in the 3rd chapter, he says. So you only eat the leftovers of having led a sacrificial life. Means everybody is like in an organization. You have all, it's collective effort. The profits have come. You have made sure everybody who are part of that effort are provided for, are taken care of. And thereafter, whatever, having looked into whatever you deserve, you take it. It's not that you have pocketed the major share and then what is left you distribute. It's not the other way around.
Okay.
So that's a sattvic thing. So, but in fact, when we get into the finer details of this, maybe there is a hidden message there. Sir.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's go through it. Gayatri Ma, verse 20 of chapter 17. Let's chant for what it's worth so that we know what the Sanskrit text is. Datavyamiti yaddanam diyate nupakarine deshe kale cha patre cha tadhanam satvikam smritam. So this verse talks about sattvic dhanam, gift given as obligatory to a recipient who does no service and is fit at the right place and right time. That gift is considered sattvika. Given as an obligation. So in fact, those who are having an intention to give and who are givers, this perhaps will give us a great insight on what platform and how to and how not to give. Yes, ma'am. So when you say, firstly, he says datavyam. Datavyam means that which ought to be given. Yes, Gayatri ma'am. So that which ought to be given means you consider it as an obligatory. It is not that you are acting on your impulses or your likes and dislikes. It's not whether you like to do it or not whether you don't like to do it. Sometimes you say, oh, I don't like to give to that person. I don't think that person deserves it. So you are not acting on emotions. You feel it is your obligatory. It's not as if you're doing a favor to the recipient. It's something which you bound, you find yourself a bounden duty. And the moment you say obligation, it springs from a rational element. There is a lot of reasoning, a lot of rationality supporting it, not an emotional, impulsive outburst of expression of feeling. Many a time it's only an emotional outburst. It's not an emotional outburst. It's a very rational thought over action where you find yourself obliged. And now the first thing he says, to a recipient who does no service. It should give you a jolt, a jerk, a knock. Ramji, what do you mean by saying anupakarine? The Sanskrit word anupakarine. You do feel obliged to give to one who does no service, to a recipient who does no service.
Namaste, Guru.
Yes, sir. Namaskar.
Yeah, I think this happens many times. We do give to people out of a process. For example, in a marriage, you give clothes to so many people because you are supposed to give to the bride's sister, the bride's father, the bridegroom's mother, right? Half of it is unnecessary, half of it is wasteful expenditure, half of it doesn't get anything in return, and half of them don't deserve it. But still you give because it is a part of the custom, it is a part of the process, right? So I think, but if you do it without a mind of unhappiness, I mean, you are giving it out of compulsion. It is more or less a compulsion that you have to do. So when you have to do that, I think if you do it at least without any bad feelings in your mind, that can be a sattvic one. But if you do it with bad feelings in mind that I'm giving it even though she doesn't deserve it or he doesn't deserve it. I don't have to give, but I am forced to give. That kind of feelings, if you have, then I don't think that will come under sattvic.
So the 21st and 22nd verse, he is going to elaborately give what is Rajasic and Tamasic. Inga, he is qualifying Sattvic Danam. And the first thing he says, to a recipient who does no service, Anupakarine.
Yeah.
I want your thoughts on this particular phrase. What does this mean? What do you understand?
That means you are not giving it you are not giving it because somebody is giving you some service or somebody is doing something for you. But you are doing it because it is a part of an obligation, a part of a compulsion of a process.
So you are doing it to someone who does no return of favor to you or who has not done anything to you.
Correct.
It means, what does it establish? That your motive is not selfish. It establishes that, isn't it? So there is no selfish motive or an expectation to gain anything out of that act of your dhanam. This person has not done anything to me, but still I want to do something to that person. Then it is sattvic dhanam.
But then why that word obligatory? Obligatory, I felt, is used basically to say that you are forced to give because of a process.
No, not forced. Obligatory. The moment you say obligation, you find it becomes your bounden duty, and bounden because you have approached it rationally. I have a duty. I find myself obliged to do it because it is my dharma.
But here we are assuming that the recipient needs it.
That's understood.
Although, yeah.
The recipient needing it, but you find obliged to be of help or service to that person. But that person, even to going to the extent that he may not even be thankful or grateful to you, he may not give anything in return back to you, or you have not been indirectly or indirectly been benefited by him, but still you find it a need, a reason to be of service to that person. So you are not acting on emotion. So the word obligation and duty means it is your intellect that decides, because when you classify actions are classified into karyam karma, regular duties, routine duties, nitya karma, regular, naimittika karma, special, nishiddha karma, forbidden. The three classifications under action: regular routine duties, occasional duties, forbidden duties. Now, what is it that would bring in clarity to the actions which are routine, occasional, and forbidden? It has to be the intellect, isn't it? Like, for example, this is my regular routine duty. Every Sunday, I stick to you all. They could be special invite where you are expected to go beyond your routine schedule, where somebody invites you, you are expected to go and lecture. That becomes your special obligatory duty. It could spill over beyond your usual routine time schedule. That becomes your special obligatory duty. Sometimes you are expected not to say anything. Nishiddham, keep quiet. Sometimes not talking becomes unnecessary, so you keep quiet, shut up. Austerity of speech you practice. Ramji.
Yeah, I do that, sir, many times.
No, that's why I'm learning that from you only, sir.
At least people think that I'm intelligent because I don't speak much.
Okay. No comments there, sir. Because I have the other side also to deal with here. No. But it takes a lot not to say. It takes a lot not to say. It's not easy. It's not easy. In fact, that's to practice austerity of speech is very, very difficult. But you rightly said, someone who doesn't do any favor in return, the exact opposite of that is you give return gifts. Birthday parties you have, you give return gifts. You're not intending to give a gift, but because you are, what is it? Bound by custom, bound. What will they feel? What will they think? As you said, in a marriage or occasion, you start, honoring the other family. You don't even know Tom, Dick, and Harry of them. Never seen them. You may never ever see them. But still, you become a part of a ritual. You do things. Why? Just bound by tradition. So you do it reluctantly. That he calling. In fact, that's the word he uses. Rajasic Danam, he says. As Venkatramji says, self-imposed obligation. Now, this obligation is not self-imposed. Is you find fairly convinced that I should do it. It's not out.
At a temple, okay. So he doesn't know who are the people who are coming and taking it. But
Sorry,
I think it
Ramji,
is something.
I think I lost you for a moment. I don't know about others. Could you come again, please?
No. Can you hear me now, Guruji?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I was saying that Annadanam, which is done by people at temples as a matter of routine, like, somebody in my building, he does it every Sunday. Somebody else may do it on a particular day, but there the recipient is not known to you. He has not done anything for you. He will, but you know that he needs food. And so perhaps that kind of things will come under Sattvic, where you do it with pleasure, with a sense of devotion, you do that.
Yes, you can say so. You can say that. Yes. Yes, Ji. Thank you, Ramji.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. A couple of comments here. Ushama has a contradicting view, Ramji. And now, Ushama, many gurus who accept Ninga Solunga.
Not this, when Mr. Venkat was speaking, I just thought of this point. This many gurus accept about even Tinkima was speaking about Ambani and all. I was just thinking, are they justified in accepting this? Even if they do it for some Loka Kalyan or something like that, still are they accept? I mean,
see, but ultimately you are stooping down to a certain level where you encourage a certain unethical practice, isn't it? You are endorsing an unethical practice.
this is on the part of the gurus.
The part of the recipient. If somebody were to knock at your door and wants to park his illegal earn resources to park in your thing, to what extent would you endorse that kind of thing, So it's
not.
It can be. It's not. It doesn't justify. It doesn't certainly not justify. Okay. Venkatramji.
No, I was responding to Usha ma'am's this thing about doorman and valet. They at least do some surveys, but some of the beggars who are very hale and hearty and they beg on the streets and have taken a route of convenience, that is also something which, you know, falls into this category.
Which category?
I mean, you are giving it to someone who is not doing any service, what you just mentioned a few minutes back.
But is that obligatory, or is it acting on impulse?
It is, well, you know, yes, it is not obligatory. Nobody is binding us. But then the fact is, over a period of time, we kind of got used to it. But
No,
of course, we start questioning.
Sir, we've interpreted obligatory as that which backs by the intellect.
So it's not obligatory. You can or you cannot. But the fact remains that while it is not an obligation and one can rationalize it, but there would be people who would also still say, hey, what is this here? You can just give some few bucks to a beggar. You know, I hear conversations sometimes with beggar, "Arey, kuch kaam karo yaar, kyun, you know, why are you begging and all?" The other guy will say, hey, what is this? Why is this guy picking up a quarrel with him? He can just tip him and then push off. So I really don't know. While it is not obligatory and one can rationalize it individually, but the fact remains is the society starts looking at it.
So my act, has it benefited the recipient?
Obviously,
No, when I say benefited, am I in one of the qualities of act of service is it must make the recipient self-sufficient. If the recipient is dependent on me, sir, you are giving education to your child, and if your child is lifelong dependent on you, what's the use of all the education you're giving?
yes.
You want your child to be self-sufficient. No doubt you're there as a parent, as a guardian, to protect for their well-being whenever they need any help or support. But you would see them to mature as a self-sufficient.
Yep.
So my act of giving has created a profession
Yes.
of beggary.
Yeah, they have become parasites.
Become
Dependent.
parasites. They become dependent. So therefore such actions doesn't come under obligatory or sattvic gift.
Oh.
Even though he doesn't mention it, but there are other elements which could be taken into the discussion. Okay, right, sir. So, and then he takes it, he doesn't take it for granted. He spells it out. Deshe kale patre. The recipient, it must receive it at the right place, in the right time. Of understood, when you don't give it in the right place, when you don't give it in the right time, it's of no service. It's useless. I'm reminded of Samuel Johnson, who wrote a letter to the Earl of Chesterfield. And Samuel Johnson is one who published the first English dictionary. I've quoted it, and it is worth quoting again and again. An Earl of Chesterfield was introduced to Samuel Johnson because Samuel Johnson needed a patron. So he went to Earl of Chesterfield for seeking support because he wants some help to publish his book. And he said, 7 years, my lord. And he writes this letter to him after he waited for 7 years and he didn't get any help. He said, I have been neither repulsed nor encouraged, but I just been waiting in the outward rooms for 7 years. He keeps coming and going, but he made him felt still interested that he could be of service. 7 years. And then after his book was published, and that's when the Earl of Chesterfield writes to the media recommending his books to the people. And when he sees that, he writes this letter to him. And one of the things he says, you know, I carried on my work without an act of assistance, without a word of encouragement or one smile of favor. I carried on my work, he said. So most patrons are like this. If at all they give, very rarely they give. If at all they give at the wrong place, wrong time. So you need that clarity of thinking when to give, what to give, to whom to give. And that clarity of intellect is that which makes the gift sattvic. What to give, whom to give, when to give. Most of the gifts are not sattvic, because most of the gifts are given colored by their emotions and impulses. So there is no, you have emotion, but you don't act on emotion. You act on reason. You may not like to do it, but you still do it. That's the important element. Okay. The opposite of this would be rich parents giving valuable gifts to their children. I've seen kids at the age of 6 and 7 taking expensive pens to their school. Mont Blanc. Yeah. So you're giving that kind of expensive pens to your grandchildren, to your children. I've actually seen kids using that kind of pen. So the gift you have given to them, it does more harm than good. You don't realize it. Is the recipient worthy of receiving? You are giving out of emotional attachment. I and my child, my grandchild. Correct, Gayatri Ma? So there is an emotional bond that is not obligatory. This is what, Ramji, this is what it means. So when you give it out of emotion, it is not dhanam. This recipient may not need it, doesn't need it. Still, you will shower them with expensive gifts. In fact, in many homes, I have seen gifts never opened at all. Still you give. Not obligatory. How many times have you not seen? I've also received gifts of chocolates which have expired. They did not know that they had it and they given to you and actually expired. And Ramji, this is what circulating, it's going in a
Sometimes I wonder the gift I give, when will I get it back? The same gift will come back to me sometimes.
In fact, when you have to, in fact, you don't need them. They're just lying there. And when you want to, hey, they only had given it. I've heard this. I've heard this in homes. In our own home, I've heard it. You know, oh, you don't make the mistake of giving the same gift back to them another occasion.
Plus, you should keep track that you don't give to the same person. Yeah.
We must have a catalogs now. Catalog the gifts. So all that makes it unwholesome, unholy. So it has to be given to the right person at the right time, at the right place. So if you give something to someone who, out of an emotion, it is not given to the right deserving person. Okay. Yeah, 21 ma. Yettu pratyupakaratham phalamuddishya va punaha diyate cha pariklishtham Tadhanam Raja Samsmritam. The gift that is given with a view to receiving something in return or expecting a fruit, again, pariklishtam, reluctantly, you don't give it with joy, reluctantly you give, is considered Rajasika. The gift, Hariji, can you please qualify this, explain to us? Yattu pratyupakarartham. The word pratyupakarartham means with a view to receive in return. The opposite of that is anupakarine. That fellow he is not going to benefit me in any way, but I still do the same act. But here, the gift is only to receive something in return. Qualified, please. You are muted, Hariji.
Sorry, Guruji. Hariom. No, you're saying that it is to be done without an expectation. So, when it is anupakarana, it is without an expectation. So
Yeah.
there is no quid pro quo. There is no return of the favor. Or the other way of looking at it is all of these concepts as, I think I don't want to be wrong, austerity of speech, I shouldn't keep saying it, but I have written it already in the chat box. That is that it is not done, whatever is not done to either extinguish a debt or a desire. Extinguishing of desire is the classification of selfish versus unselfish. Extinguishing of a debt is this doing it without expectation.
I don't understand. What is extinguishing here, please? I'm sorry.
That means I owe a debt of gratitude, so I do something. I borrowed something, I return something, or you did something for me, I return something. So these are all, you're extinguishing a debt. You're satisfying a debt. So I think that is the basic concept in both the verses. That when you say in the other one, no service, again, you're saying that there is no extinguishing of debt.
Yeah.
Because somebody did a service to you, you are repaying that service, or you are paying something, doing something in the expectation of a service. It's either way, either before or after. In either case, there is a debt which is extinguished.
That is business, no? If I have received something, I give it, it's business. It's not giving, it's not dhanam at all.
No, that's why he says it is not dhanam.
It is a false dhanam.
Yes.
Which is in fact no dhanam. So many people perform this kind, so they have some other objective in mind when they do that act. So you receive something in return or an expectation of a fruit. You want a name, fame, popularity. Yeah. Isn't it? Why would people want to do charity? Financially coming from.
Yeah. So again, what differentiates is the intention.
The intention only.
So it could be done with very pure motive. It could be done with a pure motive of actually serving the needy or whatever, or distributing your excess. So it's a proper charity.
Yes, but when you do it with some kind of a benefit,
then it's no longer a charity.
is no longer charity. So even in financial terms, let's say, if I can evade a little bit of less tax I pay, if I can get a tax benefit, what is that? Seeking a tax benefit, am I not benefited by my act? Isn't it? Could we classify that into this?
Again, intention, Guruji.
Intention is what? I must be benefited, no?
No, whether you did it and were unintendedly benefited, or whether you did
That's
it
okay.
to get benefited.
Correct. No, that is invariably it may benefit you, but you don't do it with the objective of getting benefited. I'll wait till the end of the financial year, and then only I will ask which are the institutions I can be of service. Which institution will take care of my black money because there's a possible raid in my house or factory. All those kind of unhealthy thoughts. Again, reluctantly given. So it's not the heart that gives, it's because of a certain social status everybody is giving, so you have to give. You do it reluctantly just to create a certain name for yourself. So it's unhealthy again. Such is considered Rajasika. You're just parting with few crumbs. It's like parting with few crumbs from a rich man's table. Right. Unhealthy, yeah? Not the right kind of dana. 22nd, please, the last verse. Adesha kale yaddanam apatrebhyascha diyate asat kritamavajnanam tattamasamudahritam. Now here he spells it out. Adesha kale, gift that is given at a wrong place at a wrong time, and apatrebhya, to unworthy recipient, without respect. Asatkritam, avajnanam, with insult. Such is considered tamasika. Wrong place, wrong time. Unworthy recipients. Without respect. You insult. Means you don't give it with grace. To unworthy recipients. Such as tamasika. So you will have enough examples to expand on it. You will understand the context of it. So when these three elements, the yajna, dana, tapa, are taken into consideration, one's actions become auspicious. And such auspicious actions lead you towards the goal, the ultimate goal, which is the goal of self-realization. That was the context actually we had referred to in the third mantra, and that's the little detour we took. We studied these sections from the 17th chapter. Okay, now let's go back to the 4th chapter. That's why we are in, isn't it? Where are we?
7th chapter.
Thank you, Mom. I wanted to know whether you remember where we are. 7th chapter, 4th verse, please.
4th is also right.
Correct. No, I intentionally said that. Bhumi rapo nalo vayu kham mano buddhi revacha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakrutirashthada bhumirapo nalo vayuhu kham mano buddhireva cha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakrutirashthada. Now here he mentions earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intellect, and egoism. These are the eightfold divisions of my prakriti, nature. Now, just a little, you got to switch your thoughts from what we were studying to this. Now, the 7th chapter, the first topic, verses 1 to 6, he talks of the two aspects of Brahman. So this, in the next mantra, he says, is the lower. And other than this is the higher. So there's a lower and the higher. Now, what is the lower? As spelled out, the 5 elements, the space, air, fire, water, earth. So these space, air, fire, water, what do they do? These elements create. In fact, remember in the Atma Bodha we studied. What did we study in Atma Bodha? Atma Bodha we studied that these elements combine to form gross matter and subtle matter. Gross matter is the gross body. Subtle matter is Shivaji. The subtle matter is
Mind and intellect.
the mind and intellect. So the gross body and the subtle body, which includes mind, intellect, and ego.
Mind.
All this is, he says, is my prakriti. Prakriti means
Nature.
That, he says, is in the next verse. He's going to spell it out. He says, this is the lower. All right, sir. Perfect. So both gross and subtle matter is the lower nature. Let's take up the next verse. You'll understand the context of this with reference to the next verse, please. Apareyamitastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Apareyamitastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Now here he says, this is the lower, but different from it, O Mahabaho. Know my higher prakriti nature, the very life element by which the universe is supported. Anyat, different from it. The higher, he calls it as the Jiva Bhuta. What is the Jiva Bhuta? The life-giving element, he says. The very life element is the higher para. The apara is the lower, which is the gross and subtle matter. Now, I will take up this verse when we come back next week. But all what we need to understand is he's only talking about the spirit and matter. So the matter constitutes of gross and subtle. Gross matter is the gross body. Subtle matter is the mind, intellect, the ego, and the vasanas. So subtle matter constitutes of vasanas as well. So this is the lower, he's saying. So this matter constitutes of gross matter, subtle matter. And then the spirit, he calls it as the life-giving element. So that which gives life to matter is higher. The matter is the lower. Sitaramji.
Yep.
Following
hear me?
spirit
Yes.
and matter.
Yes, I can.
So what is the matter here?
The matter is what is made up of your air, water, etc., etc. That's what makes your matter and the subtle body, which is lower compared to the spirit.
Which is lower compared to the spirit. And the matter is constituted of the five
five
elements. The five
Panchabhutas.
elements, five Panchabhutas. Maybe for the benefit, if we can get hold of that section where we spoke in Atma Bodha of the Panchikarana, maybe that section of the verse, maybe that can be shared in the group later. So you'll know how in the Atma Bodha it explained. I think it's the 9th mantra, if I'm not wrong, of Atma Bodha. It talks of how these elements form the gross matter and
The subtle.
subtle matter. Now, what we got to understand is this is lower, and then other than it is the
I have
higher.
a small doubt, which is I can relate to the these Panchabhutas creating the gross matter, which is physical, which you can see around and around. How to create the mind also can understand the mind being, say, part of the brain. It's also physical in that. But how is the intellect part of this Panchabhuta? The intellect is something which is not physical in that sense, no?
Even mind is not physical, no?
Well, it resides in the brain to an extent, so one can possibly relate to it. But I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying one can. But intellect is completely out of it. So how do you say that intellect is made up of these Panchabhutas?
See, it is just amazing how Adi Shankaracharya is the only one who spells it out in the way he classifies it in the concept of Panchikarana. Now, what is Panchikarana? Panchikarana is the pentamerous self-division. So these five elements divide and mutually combine to form matter, which is the inert matter, Inert matter constitutes of gross and subtle as well. Okay, you can take it that way because it's perishable in that sense. Now, how is it, man? I don't know how to answer. That's what's happening. He's telling that's what is happening, he says. So the five elements in their pure and nascent stage, when they combine, they form pure subtle matter. But when they go through grossification and combine, they form the gross matter.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
But the difference between mind and intellect is only thought, sir.
Yeah,
if you are
that's
being charitable to mind, little be charitable to little intellect also, no?
Yeah.
Why are you uncharitable to the intellect?
Mhm.
Huh? Because both are nothing but the nature of thoughts. So even not this, even the vasanas is matter.
Matter.
Then what about vasanas then?
Oh, that's more esoteric.
It becomes very difficult to
Yeah.
relate to, isn't it?
Yeah, to say that it is something made out of these Panchabhutas, which are very gross in nature, which you can feel and see. And you can
No,
see
what you feel and see is gross elements.
Yeah, but those five Panchabhutas are what's making the mind and intellect, and five Bhutas we can see: air, water, fire, etc.
No. The five elements that you perceive and feel, like you see fire, you can touch water. These are gross elements.
Yeah.
These gross elements form gross elements mix and form the gross body.
Yeah.
The pure elements are not perceived, not felt.
Yeah,
The pure elements form the subtle body.
Yeah.
That is difficult to fathom. That's why I said
Yeah.
it's very difficult to fathom and conceive how it is, but they have spelt it out. But from our perspective, what we need to understand is matter is different to spirit. So something which is the life element to
Yeah.
this per se insentient matter. The matter is lifeless, but there's something which gives life. That is the higher element.
Yeah, that's true.
So if I were to be concerned, I'll be concerned of the life element.
That's,
Because that's the real substance. This is all, I can understand where you're coming from. All right. Okay. I'll come back to the 5th verse. Perhaps we all will be better framed to get into that section of the text. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.